Hi, everyone. Welcome to our monthly Smart Women Saving Money webinar. We appreciate you taking the time to join us today. As you all know, we do these free webinars the second Thursday of every month. We offer a variety of different topics. Sometimes they're financial, sometimes they're about investments, and sometimes they're about lifestyle, and sometimes they're about professional development. Today, we're going to be talking to Devra Korwin, and she's going to talk about communication strategies between men and women. So stick around. We're going to get started on that in a second. What I do want to highlight for you are some upcoming events. Next month, on March 8th, the second Thursday of March, we'll be talking about having the appropriate trustee for your will and for your estate. Some people get hung up and they don't complete their wills and their trusts because they really can't figure out who the right person is for a variety of different things. It could be health or financial matters or administration matters. So we have two fabulous estate planning attorneys who will be talking to you about that next month. Also, if you're in New York City, please come by. There's going to be a luncheon for Renee Norse, and she was selected as one of the women to watch in the financial services. So Investment News is going to be having a lunch in New York City, so certainly if you are around in New York, we would love for you to come out and join us. On that note, I realized I haven't said this is Diane and not Renee, so but Renee will be around, and Renee is around, but if you're in New York, please join her. That's a fabulous award, and it goes out to only a few women in the financial services industry, where you can imagine there's very few of us. Additionally, I want to share with you some blogs that are really very timely. First of all, there's a blog that I did, it's posted right now. What's up with the market? And the market has just been extremely volatile with some large ups and downs movements, and I know we're not used to that. The market has been consistently going up for the past almost 3 to 4 years, so this volatility is a little unnerving to folks. And even though the market's probably up as compared to last year, just these violent swings have a tendency to unnerve people. And then finally, as you all know, the last few days of 2017, Congress passed and the President signed a new tax bill. So Renee did a blog on some of those 5 things that you probably didn't know that are in the new tax bill. So take a look at that. I think the combination of those 2 things will bring everyone pretty much up to date on what's going on from a financial, economic, political, IRS type of world. I'm going to hand this over to Devra. Devra is a certified coach, and she has been coaching for a while, and I'm looking forward to her sharing with you some specifics related to learning how to work in an environment with men and understand the differing communication patterns that we all bring to the table. So, Devra, are you there?
I am.
Okay, and I think Devra's pulling up her PowerPoint right now.
Okay. Hold on. And I'm pulling it up right now. So
I think you need to click on the PowerPoint part. There we go.
Okay.
Perfect. Perfect.
Thank
Go right
you.
ahead, Devra.
Okay. Thank you.
Get rolling. We're so happy to have you. We're so happy to have you.
Thank you. So here we go. All right. Hi, everybody, and welcome. I am so pleased that Diane and Renee asked me to speak on gender intelligence for urban wealth management. I don't think we could be more timely around this issue than right now. We as women really have a unique and historical opportunity to speak for ourselves and to be heard. There we go. So it's important that also that we acknowledge that we need and want to collaborate with men to achieve successful communication interactions, and I think given the present environment, they want it too. We really do want to present ourselves in an influential manner that inspires respect and response. The science is pretty clear that men and women go about the process of thinking and looking at the world and navigating their way through it in very gender-specific ways. And the research has proven that there are definitely hardwired gender variations in brain structure and biochemistry, what we call the neuroscience of the brain. So gender intelligence is a way of looking at how women and men think, act, and communicate differently, and then taking that into consideration, we really have an opportunity to learn how to listen and hear each other better, which, of course, as I mentioned, is very timely. I wanted to share something about myself as a background and give you a foundation for my information. I was until recently, the Senior Organization Development Specialist for Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles for 13 years and the internal coach. And one area of coaching I specialized in was interpersonal communication with a focus on gender intelligence, utilizing research by the Gender Intelligence Group. I am a professional certified coach through the International Coach Federation, and I'm a graduate of the Hudson Coach Institute. The reason I'm mentioning the latter is because I was first introduced to gender intelligence through a workshop taught by Barbara Annis, who is the founder and CEO of the Gender Intelligence Group. And they work with organizations specializing in leveraging gender differences to achieve organizational success, one of the main reasons being that organizations were starting to lose a lot of their top female players because of gender issues. So let me take you to a quote from Barbara Annis. Gender intelligence is an understanding of and appreciation for the naturally occurring characteristics that distinguish men and women, and an awareness of why that is so, and why men and women think and act helps to understand gender-related tendencies and engage more effectively in the workplace and other areas of life. I think you'll find this applies not only to work, but personally. And you can see it's a quote from her book, Same Words, Different Language, which I used as a resource for this presentation. Let's take a look at what the agenda will be. It's going to be gender brain wiring is the first thing I'm talking about, and the second one is gender intelligence communication within these 30 minutes. So the neuroscience of gender. Let's think about men's brains. They evolved originally to make them able hunters, and they were adapted to focus on the goal. Go out there and get that food and bring it back to feed everybody. Women's brains evolved to make them, able gatherers, and they were adapted to take in a lot of stimuli as we searched for food, we built relationships, and we looked after our children all at the same time, what today would be called multitasking. So this neuroscience, pretty well developed, I guess, and presented in business in the last 10 years or so, is a combined work of anthropologists and neuroscientists and biomedical research and neurobiology and psychologists, and it does show that these technological advances confirm men's and women's brains just are different. When we speak of behavioral differences, we're describing a bell curve of gender-related tendencies. And as you can see, women tend to distribute to the intuitive and men to the factual, with a 20% in the middle crossover. I think people are more complicated and individualistic than assessments and research, but our brain differences specifically influence our perceptions and communications, and we are hardwired differently, and it does affect how we think and communicate and behave. Let's take a look at brain hemispheres, and you're probably familiar with this, but just to reiterate, the left hemisphere is dominant in language, in processing what we hear and how we communicate. It is a source of linear, logical, and serial thinking. And when we need to retrieve a fact, reach way back in our brain and pull it from our memory, it is the left brain that does it. You can see by the cartoon here, it illustrates individuals sitting in cubicles looking at computers. So it's very focused, very analytical. The right brain helps to comprehend visual imagery, and it plays a big role in language and in interpreting context, abstract thought, and a person's tone, how we deal with emotions. It's in charge of spatial abilities and face recognition and processing music. It's a lot, isn't it? And it's what we often consider the creative side of the brain, as illustrated by all these people doing creative things in the meadow on the right-hand side of the cartoon. The reason I put this information out there is that men use their right and brain sequentially. That is, if they're using the right brain, they leave that brain to go to the left. We have 25%, pretty good percentage, more neural density, so that we're able to source both sides simultaneously, and that allows us to see the bigger picture. We're going to look at one example from the brain, just one area, but it does impact us in terms of gender. The hippocampus is the center for memory and emotion. It influences how we navigate our environment and absorb and process information. It is larger and more active, far more active in women. It's where our information goes from short-term into long-term memory, and it's the source of noticing and recalling small details and making those instantaneous connections to the past and then coding them into long-term memory. So women instinctively connect the dots and focus on long-term implications, let's say, of a decision and how a decision will affect their personal and work relationships. It lends itself to a collaborative approach. The hippocampus on men is less busy, but what it does do, it equips them to focus quickly and sharply on important features of a problem, to remember the facts of the experience rather than its relation to context, and to zero in on the essence of a situation. Men appreciate connecting the dots, but the way their brain works is that they tend to isolate the issue and focus on the short term. It's just two very different ways of assimilating information. Both of them are important. And what is useful is the ability to use both perspectives to make better and more thorough decisions. Let's take a look at teamwork. I'm assuming that those of you who are listening work in an organization, and I can't recall the last time I didn't do something at least with one other person. Women get rewarded by collaboration, and it's very interesting because the blood activity in the reward centers of the brain rises when women collaborate. So they found collaboration and cooperation very rewarding. For men, the reward is competition. Their brain centers show that, by contrast, they feel rewarded when they beat the competition and win the game. Clearly, the rewards are different. The reason I put collective intelligence up there is because of teamwork and meetings, and what that means is how well a group works together. And studies show that teams that contain more women have greater collective intelligence compared to groups with fewer women. Interesting, huh? It brings us to the traditional business model, and I wanted to share that with you because it is common and universal, and it's one that women in corporate life have been placed in this cultural construct that has been defined for generations by male behavior and male-specific rules, and we've tried to adapt to it. It is written from a male mindset based on a military model of command and control. You can see the words there. You can see competition. You can see authority. You can see hierarchical. And one that's also mirrored in team sports. By the way, training started in the armed forces, and then it was integrated into business training. This model doesn't correspond to the way women naturally think and work, because our natural female model looks a lot more like the new paradigm many of today's businesses are trying to adopt, and I know that Cedars did this within the last 5 or 6 years that I was there. So you can see this is more female-oriented, relationship-based, flattened management, partnership, empowerment, moving toward a win-win as opposed to competition, developing trust. So combining these characteristics are very, very important. And I can summarize this if you look at the differences in leadership, or just in general. It could be just from an employee perspective. Women tend to apply more people development, expectations and reward, role modeling, participative decision making. You can see how that is reflected in the new business model. Men tend to apply more individualistic decision making, corrective action and control, and linear thinking. And that certainly is reflected in the older business model. Women and men tend to apply intellectual stimulation and efficient communication. And the bottom line is truly that organizations really need to learn how to make use of both our strengths so that both genders will flourish and really help the organization to be productive. I want to move on here to the second part of the agenda, which is gender intelligence communication. And this is important because these are basic communication components and linguistic issues that can impact how women are heard and perceived. They do apply to both genders. So let's take a look at this first one. This is out of UCLA in terms of the research on communication. They say that we use 3 channels to create 100% of our message. The first one is what? The content, whatever it is that we want to talk about. The second one is the vocal, how it's presented, what we sound like. And the third one is the visual, what is seen when we're presenting this information. The content, interestingly enough, is very small. It's only 7%. So your arrangement of words and phrases to create well-formed sentences, to clarify your content is very, very important because it's impacted by 38% of the vocal, and I'm going to go into that in more detail in a moment because that is so important for women. And finally, 55% in the visual. Well, we certainly can look at body language as visual, posture, eye contact, any kind of fidgeting, touching hair, frowning, eye rolling, and certainly everything that's seen. Gender, height, weight, age, ethnicity, everything that is in your view. So if you put both of those together, 93% impact the 7% of the content. And I want to talk about that 38% because I think that is so important for women. Pitch and tone. Lower voices, medium to lower voices, tend to be considered more professional and get more respect. If you listen to the pitch or tone of women speaking on TV, you'll see that that's so. The second one is this little baby voice kind of goes up there when we get excited and all kind of meet together, or we get interested in something. We tend to go into a higher register. It's okay between women, but it's not a good idea at work. And if that was the way you got attention as a child, you don't get much respect at a meeting. The next one is ending your sentences up. So let's say if you were saying, I have something really important to share with you, you can see what happens. You lose your power. Qualifiers, very important. That shows in sentences like, well, I'm probably not right about this, or I may be wrong. So while you're going forward, you're moving backward. Non-words, oh, please use them and lose them, actually. You don't want to use like, you know, and, I'm guilty of that sometimes. It's not always easy to lose, but do pay attention to that. Attitude is important. If it's an attitude, then please do leave it at the door. People hear it and respond to it. Accent. If you have an accent and you feel it's interfering, then please do consider getting coached in accent reduction or taking a class in it. And finally, vocal energy. Lazy pronunciation, a slow presentation of thoughts is not appreciated. You need to be clear and focused. Bottom line is think about what you want to say and rehearse out loud. Don't do it in your head. It's very different. You need to hear yourself. You can record yourself. You want to be sure that you don't give away your personal power. I want to move on to what's called interpersonal influence. Diane was there. I used an you could hear that. Diane was very interested in making sure that I spoke about the difference between being assertive and being aggressive. And I think that's particularly important for women at the present time. So let's take a look at aggressive. We're going to define it. It's where you boldly, or one boldly insists, my rights and needs prevail, where situations are attacked full force and decisions and choices are made for you. There's this sense of entitlement about it. It tends to be very controlling, arrogant. It can be angry, frustrated. Oftentimes comes across as loud, rude, using derogatory remarks and finger pointing, clenching fists, kind of a rigid posture, that kind of thing. That's aggressive. Let's look at passive, where others' rights and needs take precedence, where one retreats from situations, avoids conflicts, and expressing feelings and needs and wants. Oftentimes, it's when someone lacks confidence, they feel inadequate, they may be concerned about jeopardizing a relationship, often belittles their own opinions, uses poor posture, slumping perhaps, kind of trying to fade out of the situation. The eyes are downcast. Not a lot of power in that position. Assertiveness clearly expresses that both have rights and needs, and it approaches situations directly and openly and takes care of one's own needs without violating the needs of others. It is authentic. It is self-confident. It is respectful of others. It's flexible because you're not frightened of being challenged. It's spontaneous. It's being a good listener, fully in charge of oneself, having good posture, using direct eye contact, very important. And I call it locating your backbone. Let's look at some language examples. Here's aggressive language. That was stupid. That's just enough out of you. You can see how derogatory that is. Even if you said it nicely, I don't know what you're talking about. You can still see that's rude. Here's passive language. Oh, it's nothing. Oh, that's all right. oh, I'm probably wrong, but there's your qualifier. You just fade out. Assertive language is really respectful and direct, saying it like it is. I would like whatever it is that you'd like. Well, I can't accept that because, and be clear about that. I'd like to clarify this. Let's take a look at it. I'd appreciate your comments. You can even hear it in my voice. It's very direct, it's concise, it's getting to the point, it's standing up and being a grown-up. One more communication thing in listening and misinterpretation of listening. Let's say she's discussing an idea at a meeting. She makes a suggestion and asks for input from others as a dialogue starter. He puts an idea on the table and clearly states what the plan is. Well, the misinterpretation comes about when her point of view is that she has an objective to get dialogue going, to be inclusive of opinions and encourage collaboration, to pull it all together and have all the information as you move forward toward an objective. Well, from the male point of view, he can often interpret this as being uncertain, unprepared, and lacking confidence because you're asking questions and asking for input. A suggestion to avoid misinterpretation: declare your intention of creating mutual understanding. Saying something like, I have a lot of things I want to share with you. I want to be sure I'm clear. Please jump in if it's not clear. And watch for clues of misunderstanding. Certainly check body language, eye rolling, people crossing their arms, pushing away from the table, etc. Finally, I wanted to share one more thing with you in terms of dealing with conflict, where we call this switching from a blame frame to a positive outcome frame, and not from a fault-finding position. So step one, take a break, remove yourself. You can say, I'll come back to you on that. People do it all the time. I need a break right now. I want to look up the facts. I want to be sure I'm clear about this. I want to check into something. I need a few moments to do that. However it is that you want to do it, if you do it respectfully and courteously, there's no problem with it. You want to use that break time, whatever it is, 15 minutes a day the next week, to find people who can listen to you who have different perspectives so that you can get an honest response and maybe illuminate some thoughts that you hadn't had before. Know your long-term intentions. Do you want this collaboration to work? Most times one does. So you want to ask yourself and them, how can we resolve this? What would be a good solution for you? Listen, listen, listen. This is a quote from Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Most people listen with the intent to reply instead of the intent to understand. Need I say more? Forget who's right or wrong and focus on the cost of conflict and disengage your ego. Consider what a winning solution would be for both of you and make an effort to move to a win-win solution. Another 7 Habits quote, win-win is a belief in the third alternative. It's a really nice way to look at it. It's not your way or my way. It's a better way. It's a collaborative way. So finally, I want to end with this quote from the Gender Intelligence Group. The solution isn't eliminating the differences between men and women, but instead learning how to recognize value and leverage those differences. I just think when men and women are speaking the same language and can take from and add to the other's gender-specific strengths and abilities, the work they produce together is far better than anything either gender can manage on their own. So this brings me to the end of this presentation. I want to close with giving you my contact information. I do have a website, as you can see there, and I'm very pleased to speak to you for free for a half-hour consultation. I do all kinds of coaching, and as you know, I call it transformative coaching, because coaching generally is around change, a career change or a life change, or leadership development, or performance improvement, or transitioning from a job to retirement, a lot of different objectives. And because you listened to this, I'm very glad to consider a 10% reduction on our first contract if you make reference to attending this presentation. Again, I want to thank Renee and Diane for giving me this opportunity to share this information. I love this subject, and you can probably tell I have some passion around it, and I'm very glad to speak with you about it. Take care, and good luck. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Devra. That was absolutely great. I certainly really enjoyed it, and I'm sure everyone else did. I love that you really touched base on the assertiveness versus aggressive, because I think as women we often are seen as being aggressive instead of just us asserting what our desires are. And I'm very appreciative that you provided some phrases and words and some actual behavior that we can use to really get our point across in a very efficient and effective way.
You know what, Diane, I'm thinking, I don't know if you guys want to do this at some time, and obviously this would be a business situation, but I do a workshop on assertiveness that includes a self-assessment. And it really might be something you might want to consider doing for your staff, for you guys and your staff. How many of you are there?
So let's just talk about, you know, the webinar. So I wanted to ask a question for the group, and
are we still?
I would really love for you to touch on, considering the environment we're in right now, how can we engage men in this this dialogue? Because, you know, they're in a difficult situation right now. Women are in a difficult situation right now. So what are some behaviors or some of the things that we can all do to make sure that men are part of the conversation and that we're including them?
Well, I think one is to approach them from what I would call an emotional intelligence point of view, not from hostility or anger or disappointment or fear that they might do something. If you approach them with respect, because I think that they're in a place of great concern and even some fear, particularly working in organizations where HR really looks at harassment. So I think you can be helpful and maybe share some of this information with them. For anybody who has a partner, a husband, you might want to take this presentation and share it with them so that they understand the differences. I think what's really important in reading Barbara Annis's book, there's a big paragraph in there where she says how relieved everybody was who went through her program, men and women, to find out that, oh yeah, that's natural for me. That's how I think and feel. And once you have that as a basis, you can move forward and talk to each other, recognizing that. Great.
Thank you so much, Devra. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Wishing everyone a early, happy, wonderful, fabulous weekend, whatever you're going to do. Super Bowl's over, so our weekends are free. So thank you for joining us. Make sure you go to our website to sign up for our next Smart Women Savvy Money webinar, which is really delving into estate planning a little bit and figuring out who the appropriate trustee is for whatever it is you want to accomplish with your estate. Thank you so much, everyone. I'm going to sign off. I appreciate it. Take it easy. Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.